Hello and welcome to the second episode of the After This podcast, where we're trying to deal with the topic of human unification, big as it is. So, what we're trying to look into this time, and it's still kind of broad, is essentially looking into fiction. So, how we've envisaged the idea of unification in anything, any form of fiction. So that's TV, that's movies, that's books, that's everything that people have imagined since we've been imagining things. And what does that tell us about ourselves? So first off, to jump into the topics essentially, I'm going to hand it over to Carla.
Well, I think the most obvious example that comes to mind first is the Federation in Star Trek.
Yep, absolutely.
Which I think, now I've only watched original series and I'm halfway through Next Gen. But I believe it holds for all the rest of the shows as well.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Star Trek's a good example.
Yeah, and it is fairly utopian. I mean, most of the problems that they come to in Star Trek, I mean, there's a little bit of fighting with external races and that kind of thing, but most of them are diplomatic problems that are solved through talking and understanding each other.
I guess that's the illustration though. They don't really make a massive deal over dealing with people anymore.
No,
it's like any beefs we have are with some massive outer power that we have to deal with. The things between people are long in the past. No, it's a good point, because I think in Next Generation they talk quite a lot about World War III and like how it ended really badly and then what happened afterwards and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's a very utopian one. It's very, very utopian, where they've figured it out, they've unified, they've spread to the stars, and they're trying to do whatever comes next. So look, the other obvious one is Star Wars. Because the thing is, Star Wars is fundamentally about a gigantic republic that is defending itself against things that are trying to break it apart. If you look at the first three movies, it's effectively the Republic's been turned into the Empire, which is the danger, I suppose. I guess that's what people envisage as the dystopian version. It's it might turn into an empire and then we're all fucked, kind of thing. Like that's
become very authoritarian and dictatory.
No, exactly. And so the imperial side of the coin is not so great, but I guess that's the two sides of it. Is that people see the republic, they see it turn into an empire, and then it sort of turns into a republic again. But we still seem enamored. Like, it seems, between Star Trek and Star Wars at least, it seems like it's an inevitability. So like we seem to look at it and we're saying to ourselves, like, whether it's good or it's bad, it almost seems like the inevitable destination. So look, I'm just going to ream off a few other ones that I'd thought of, and obviously jump in if you know them.
I'll butt in quickly. What about both the Avatars? The movie Avatar?
Mm-hmm.
Are you talking about the cartoon as well?
Yeah, the cartoon.
I've never really seen the cartoon, but you can talk about it.
I guess it's just more about the elements, like the earth, fire, wind, and water, and that they're supposed to be in a harmony together. But when the fire starts to burn and spreads throughout the thing, that's when it starts forming from a utopia to a dystopia through conquering and domination of the other elements, and then it's finding, and then you've got the last airbender that has to find that unification within himself between the elements in order to overcome the domination of one.
I'll say it's almost the idea that there needs to be more than one entity so that those different entities can keep each other in check.
That makes a good point. So how does it end? How does Avatar end? Like, what's the outcome of the struggle?
Just the Avatar.
Spoiler alert. I haven't seen it, but I more want to know what happens.
I don't want to give too much spoiler away, but just, I guess, the metaphor that I took from it was the fact that we have all these different elements within ourselves. We have the fire, the earth, the air, and the water. And in order to overcome the element that is dominating. We have to find that within ourselves, as well as align it with all the other elements in order to become something greater.
So there can be cooperation.
Exactly.
So finding a balance.
And exactly. So it's like to say that we all have like a certain like emotions and whatnot, and it's just understanding that it's just the alignment of.
It's basically, it sounds like it's essentially about finding the balance point between all these different things, and if you can kind of incorporate all of them, you get something greater than the sum of its parts.
So internal checks and balances, I suppose, rather than needing an external.
Exactly.
What I said before.
And I guess there's the implication almost being that if you didn't have all four of them, you'd be weaker for it. Because you didn't have the combination. So I think it sort of plays into kind of the utopian version, although the dangers of dystopia are kind of there, like you said. So the next big one I had, which everyone is maybe aware of but doesn't know all the story behind, is Warhammer 40k, which is basically an extremely violent version. but effectively, the idea of 40k, it's got this insanely long story to it. It's basically just that around the 20th, 30th millennium, there's this expansion of the human race, and they spread across the entire galaxy. And then they all lose contact with each other because technology goes down. But then to kind of to stop it splintering, this emperor rises up on Earth, creates these gigantic armies, and then basically reconquers everything in the entire galaxy. And it's an extremely violent process to reconquer everything. But the idea is in that there's this inevitability that it's almost has to come together again. And the picture that they have of the future is effectively one that's very, very dark. But it's basically at the end of all that, so 20,000 years later, which is 40k, so 40,000, it's like the entirety of humanity is one gigantic empire, and they're protecting themselves against 20 different things that want to kill them every 5 seconds. And it gets really militarized, but it's effectively we have to stand together because all the stories and novels are all about sort of when humanity starts splintering and then it gets torn to bits.
And I think when we're talking about fiction that includes aliens other than humans, we kind of need to think about whether we need to include the aliens in us discussing unification, because otherwise it's not really universal unification. It's still these splintered groups. You still got the humans against the others. And then if you want to translate that back into real world, that's still having two different groups. It's not true unification.
No, exactly. I guess that's the thing is we're kind of feeding through stuff like that. We're kind of feeding the idea that without an external threat, we can't get along. We have to have this idea of something else to be against. And so it's kind of the worst and best sides of the argument almost at the same time. It's it's a very good point though. So the next one is the Culture Saga, which was all about. I was going to touch on this one briefly. This was all about. I can't remember who wrote the Culture Saga, but it was
Banks.
Okay, yeah. So
I read them.
I know. Well, there you go. I've read the first one. I don't remember what it was. But I read the first one. It was all about this culture that basically they've just got robots doing everything. They're people that effectively philosophize and pursue leisure, and they're scientists. They do things that they want to do them. It's kind of like Star Trek, where the really horrible things are just done by machines. And they have effectively just come together and they're able to live the way they want to live. And it's almost like the implication that without the desperation, without the suffering and everything else that comes with the human condition, it's easy for us to get along because we all have attendants and robots and all that sort of thing. How true that is, I don't know, but it's very present in the Culture Saga. Is all about this idea that with robots taking over, and if we can restructure society to take advantage of that, we can get along much easier. I don't know how true that is, though.
Yeah, I think it touches on the disparity issue that we talked about in the first episode.
Exactly. It's because the idea is
enough resources if we all share the resources equally, but humans tend to like to hoard resources.
The thing is that they've shown that the amount of, like, the gross inefficiency of charity programs. The thing is that, like, for every dollar or something on average that goes to charity, it's some tiny number of cents that actually ends up where it's meant to go, because it's such a broken system the way that
there's a complication there that I like to bring up when people talk about this, is that you do need to spend money on overhead if you want to get the good people, and you need to spend a lot of money on advertising if you want to keep getting donations. So I think not taking away from your point at all, I think there are definitely a lot of issues with the efficiencies, but you can't really just look at the dollar amount.
I guess I more mean to go from the charity system to juxtapose it against something like the like a state social security net. For instance, like you can imagine some kind of security net that is regulating labour and, you know, giving welfare payments and whatever wherever they're needed, versus a charity system where effectively you have to work with whatever insane government you have in that place and try and funnel things through terrible infrastructure to people that need it. It's like there's so many barriers that you have to get through where you could potentially just have fixed them and gotten the money straight there. But instead you have to play with this weird international system to get the money to the places, and it makes it that much harder.
And I guess that is one of the things that unification would have a big effect on. You don't have to work with all these different governments and deal with the difficulties of being from one nation trying to help a different one. And because the amount of money that they've spent on charities and everything, apparently they could have solved the poverty problem something like 10 times. But the thing is, because of the way that they've done it with foreign aid and charities, it's not as efficient.
I guess that's just sort of like a problem when you have sort of like a privatized media sector. That you can't just offer like a benevolent cause. Just to, you know, gain revenue. Is just like it just becomes like a business, like every other sort of business.
Absolutely.
No, that's definitely a good point. We should actually do a thing on charity.
I think this is a good topic for a separate issue.
I think that actually would be a good one. I don't think I've written that down, but I will.
Just to clarify, we're not a charity here, so.
We have to get some more listeners before we start a Patreon.
The next one is the Forever War. The Forever War was another one I read about, which was, I'm not going to go into detail about it because I only remember it vaguely, but the thing is, again, it was about this gigantic, you know, version of humanity that's one solid entity, and it's basically this guy who gets recruited into this, like, military thing, and he ends up having to fight, like, these endless wars, and, like, it's an exchange. Oh no, sorry, that's a different book. It's not an exchange for a thing. He basically just works with this big organization. I just wanted to bring it up because it was just another one. It's actually very well known, but I wish I could remember it better. But I remember it's the same concept.
It's another outside force.
It's the same concept of unifying, going out, fighting people endlessly. Which brings me to, Starship Troopers. So Starship Troopers, the original book by Robert Heinlein, which was written in like the 70s, and then they made it into the movie that everyone loves, including myself. It's fantastic.
I've read the book, I haven't seen the movie.
Oh, you haven't?
No.
Right, you haven't seen Starship Troopers?
No.
This is insane.
Even I've seen Starship Troopers.
So the book is obviously a lot more like developed. The movie is more just amazing.
Okay. Is the movie? I think I've heard the movie is a lot. It comes across much less of a satire than the book does.
Yes, because the thing is, they touch on it, but you have to be paying attention.
Right.
Like,
whereas the book, it's very clearly satire.
It's very clearly like this kind of fascist state where like you have to do military service to be in the to be a citizen and all that kind of stuff. They touch on it a lot more solidly in the book, and you know, the wars against the bugs and how they develop, and then like he develops like some. No, sorry, that's Ender's War. But they develop. Sorry, no, but the endless fights against the bugs and everything else in the novel, it's very fascist. It's very obviously fascist. Whereas in the movie, it's almost like tongue in cheek because it's like you should be, you know, in the military and serve, and then you'll be a citizen. But yeah, it's not as obvious. It's definitely not as obvious. Do you remember the book well?
Not super well.
Yeah.
No. But again, I do remember that it is again one of those, unifications through and outside.
Yeah, it's funny though.
Can we think of any examples where that's not the case?
I know, exactly. That's the th- I actually have one. I have one example, and that's the funny thing, isn't it? That all these examples of the future where there's some big space opera or something, it's always that there's a unified humanity against something.
I can't believe this didn't occur to me before, but climate change is a big external threat that's going to kill us all equally. Actually, it's not going to kill us all equally, but that will affect everybody.
Yeah.
And that hasn't worked.
No, but I would say it's worked better than other things.
Possibly, yeah.
Because you see all the way that people, like especially young people, have come out in the protests and everything. It seems to have created more focus than anything else ever has, except for maybe communism back in the day. Those two are the only things that seem to have really achieved that.
But even communism, you're fighting a thing that is about humans being a group of humans and doing things. Whereas, I mean, I guess you can argue that that's true of climate change as well, but it's more reminiscent of the asteroid smashing into Earth that you mentioned last episode, Shannon, that it's an external threat that's not another group of sentient beings.
Oh, it's definitely different. Yeah, no, it seems to be it's the only thing since that's brought out like this kind of revolutionary new, like we need to change things kind of thing. But yes, no, definitely climate change. It sort of has, but it mostly hasn't. Yeah. So the next one was Ender's War. Ender's War was the book and then the film that came out long ago. That one is all about, again, humans get attacked by aliens in the past, and then they have to train kids to basically be these like commanders of these fleets, because the kids, they have to find the ones that are good enough, young enough, that they can teach them the right things, and it gets into the weird territory of child soldiers. But the whole thing is that it's meant to be, because it's all a contrivance so that they can have teenagers in an academy. But the thing is, like, I see like the general thrust of it. Yeah, is that like humanity has these problems. They get attacked by aliens. They don't have problems anymore. They now have problems with aliens. Like, it's the same transference of problems kind of thing. Like, yes, I hate you, but that's worse.
Yeah.
So, it's the same concept, but then in the end, spoiler again. In the end, he thinks it's all a training exercise, and he ends up destroying the entire species because he thinks
a bunch of human ships in the meantime.
Yeah, exactly. And then at the end of the movie, he sees the alien. But in the book, it's meant to be. The book is meant to be all about this transfer into this new saga, which is where he becomes friends with the aliens and like tries to apologize essentially, because there's like refugee aliens and stuff, but it's funny because that was the series he wanted to write, and then he wrote he wrote Ender's War as a way to contextualize the one he actually wanted. Ender's War got stupidly famous, and the rest of it didn't go anywhere.
I just have to, because there are people screaming at their phones right now, Ender's Game, not Ender's War.
Oh,
it'd be
Ender's
a bit of a
Game.
giveaway if it was called Ender's War.
Yeah, Ender's Game. That's what it was called. It's funny. I've read the book. I've seen the movie. I still couldn't.
No, I don't. I wouldn't.
I think it must be
correct
called
it,
the
but
Ender's War Saga or something.
Possibly.
Because
yeah.
I've heard those words together.
Possibly, yeah.
You probably there you go. Correction. Useful. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So the next one is the Commonwealth Saga by Hamilton. Which was really good. That again, it's the same thing. It's humans are stuck on Earth, but then they find a technology to teleport themselves. So the thing is, what they end up doing is creating these portals and driving trains through them. So they have portals on different planets, and they take the train to the other planet because there's a portal stuck on the ground, and that train will get them to the next planet, and then they can get off and be there because it's faster than. It's easier than having a portal in space.
Yeah, that makes much more sense. I can't believe I've never noticed how much more sense that makes.
Because like they can build it, they can have it there, they can maintain it. All they do is drive a train into it, and it comes out on the other planet. And yeah, so again, it's the same thing because humanity is like the Commonwealth. It's this gigantic organization, institution. Again, it's I guess the point we're trying to make with all. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think just looking at these different fictions, it's really obvious that we don't think we can do it without an external threat.
Yeah.
Whether it be a threat or something to align us.
Yeah.
Well, that's the because that's exactly, and that's the funny thing with the Commonwealth thing is that actually it's one example I can think of where there isn't an external threat. It's like they develop the technology and expand, but then so much more of it is about the problems that humans have with each other, and it's almost like the inevitability that we need that external thing to keep us together. Even if we expand, we start having beefs with each other if we don't. Yeah. Although in that also people can't die. So the thing is people die and they get put into new bodies kind of thing.
Okay.
So like without the fear of death, maybe that changes things too.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. So anyway,
that's what's crystallized for me having this discussion is that
the external threat thing
fiction
is fantastic for getting people to cooperate on anything in the world. Like you look at like the way the West has kind of forgotten all the problems that they had between Protestants and Catholics. Like they had a war for ages. I think it was the 30 Years' War.
Killed a lot of people.
I think I'm thinking of that one where they just killed each other for being Protestants and Catholics.
The Troubles.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, of course. I mean, this is a different scale, but yeah, like absolutely. The thing is, it's the stuff people have done just between Christians, and now they have a much bigger beef with Muslims that it's distracted them, and it's like they need someone to hate.
Whereabouts and what year was this war, Daniel?
The 30 Years' War.
Yeah.
This was like I don't know if I'm thinking of the 100 Years' War or the 30 Years' War. There's two. One of them was about that, and it was like in the medieval era, so it was like between like knights and peasants and that sort of thing. But like it was the countries that were pro-Protestantism versus the countries that were pro-Catholicism, and they fought each other a bunch, and a lot of people died because as with any civil war, lots of people die. But yes, no, it's a good point to bring that up. Yeah, so look, I'll just go through the rest of the list. The Expanse, which was made into a TV show, which is kind of actually about humans killing each other until we figure out there's a bigger problem. Which again plays to your point. Because it's all Mars and Earth being at each other. Have you watched The Expanse?
No, not that one.
It's a really good show. Okay. Definitely recommend
I'll add
it.
it to the list.
It's on, I think it's on Amazon Prime now or something, but it's very good. But like, it's primarily about the beefs between the outer colonies, Mars and Earth, and they're all humans. But then some alien stuff gets involved, and then they're all like, this is a bigger problem kind of thing, and then they stop killing each other.
Yeah.
And it's like, again, it plays to your point.
Same story.
We don't seem to be able to conceive of it without having like an external threat. The Arrival, the movie, have you seen that?
Yes, I love that film.
That was a really good film. But it's the same thing. They're trying to like teaching us to get along. Like that was kind of the point of the movie. Yeah. And then at the end, there's that Chinese guy comes up to her and mentions that it's Unification Day or something. Like, and that's where they all are. Like it's in passing, but like it's the whole movie is the implication that that's where it ends up. But it's like we need these big scary things to put us into perspective. Yeah. It's almost like they don't need to be a threat. They're just
that's an interesting one because they're not coming to kill us.
But we're terrified of them anyway.
We're still scared that that's the case.
It's something that moves the lens. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like you don't have the Earth lens with our map of Earth and the countries on Earth and everything else. We're suddenly like just having aliens there, even if they're not actually threatening anyone, kind of thing. Like,
I guess
the lens gets huge.
Yeah. We just got to convince people there's aliens on the dark side of the moon.
That'd do it.
That's a great idea. All right, new podcast idea: conspiracy theories about aliens.
I already listened to a couple of those.
Too many.
So the Arrival. It's sort of a different twist, but it's sort of the same thing. It's almost more about
the best we can hope for.
It's almost more about we just need the lens to get bigger. It's even if it's not necessarily them trying to kill us, it's just the lens getting bigger. So this one's a bit of a weird one. I love this movie. It's Interstellar. Yes. But the thing is, this one hasn't got aliens in it. The thing is, it's just that it's about the concept of them getting... Because he gets to the end of the thing and he gets into the black hole and the big construct thing. And then it's essentially that there's some kind of future humanity that's become something far beyond anything we understand. And it's guiding us to do something. But there's no hint at all like there's any division in this, whatever this future humanity is.
From what I remember, we don't really see much about them, though, do we?
No, it's all implication.
Yeah.
It's all like they don't physically exist anywhere.
They're a possibility. But even then, again, it's still an existential crisis that kicks it all off.
It makes the lens bigger, regardless.
Yeah.
Like, and it's meant to be. They don't really touch on it much, but it seems almost like the way the ending is with the space stations and them with their new like spaceships and stuff. Like, they've all, like, Earth kind of went to crap and they've all sort of left it together, kind of thing. It's implied.
Yes.
It's not it's not said, but they don't say anything to the opposite.
Yeah.
And it seems almost implied, but yeah. Whereas before, there's this fixation still in the countries, but it's sort of dissolving because the whole world's going to crap. Because they're talking about, like, the Indian Air Force and there's the NASA's people and all that sort of stuff. So it's sort of like it's drifting off and there's an implication it's going somewhere else.
Right.
But yeah, it's a worthwhile thing to mention. And then, of course, I have Independence Day. So that is a perfect example of what you were talking about. So yes, everyone remembers Independence Day, where basically the aliens turn up and say, we're going to kill you all, and we get together and kill them first. That's the entire film. But yeah, the whole thing is that all these people in all these different countries have to work together, and the second Independence Day, which is pretty bad. Although I remember the trailer came out, I was thinking to myself, this is the movie I never realised I needed. And then it turned out to be bad, and I was really sad. But the whole beginning, it's like, yeah, we're not countries anymore, we're one thing, and we're defending ourselves in case they come back.
Yeah.
Like, that's the whole start of the second film. And they have, like, bases on the moon and all this stuff, and it's just the lens has gotten huge.
Yeah.
So it's a perfect example that, again, we just need that lens to get bigger, obviously.
Quick question for you, Daniel. Have you seen Mars Attacks?
That is a great film!
What do you think is more likely? An Independence Day scenario if aliens were to contact Earth?
Yep.
Would it be more of a Mars Attacks where we have the peace-offering dove, or we just go straight to war?
I think I'm trying to remember Mars Attacks. It was hilarious.
It pretty much started like, I'm not too familiar with it other than when they were there, we would see them as a threat, and so we just tried to make the whole peace thing with, like, nervously, please accept peace, and then throw the dove, and like, and that's when
they keep saying that they want peace, and then killing us, and we keep falling for it.
I think, what we'd wanted to relate it to, and we try to think about what would really happen, is you try and think about, like, the tribes in the New World when they first saw, like, the Spanish conquistadors and things, and they had all this technology, they thought they were magic, like, all this sort of stuff, they didn't know what to make of them, and it was kind of like a confused response of, please don't hurt me, and we should kill them first. Like, I think our first gut response would be, let's try not to piss them off because they've come here in a spaceship and who knows what they can do, kind of thing. I think that would be the gut response. But at the same time, so many humans would be trying to figure out a way to kill them first, because if we find a weakness, there'd be people trying to do it, and that's what it is. That's especially the Arrival. It's basically, we're trying to make friends because they're in giant fucking spaceships.
Yeah, they've clearly got the technology to outgun us.
To do whatever they want, but then obviously some people are so afraid.
Yeah.
And that's the key, it's fear.
Well, I guess, if we know we're technologically inferior, surprise attack is the only chance we're going to have.
Exactly, and so I think a lot of people would be like, we need to hit them and do it all at once, break people out of the stupor and get them fighting, kind of thing. Like, that would be what some people would think. So I really hope for the peaceful one, but we might just start shooting them and kill ourselves in the process. So
probably end up with two tribes of human, and half of us want to be nice and half of us want to attack
kill them.
first.
Yeah. And then maybe the one will get the other one killed, or maybe only one will die. Who knows? Something bad. And then last, I have two examples. One is actually the opposite one that I was talking about, and the last positive one is Halo. So the Halo series is basically, it's the UN, and then it's expanded a bit into being kind of more of a polity, but then the Covenant turns up, so the aliens of the Covenant start attacking random colonies, and so we've already expanded to space, and then it becomes kind of like this much more hardcore UNSC. It's like a military state. after that point, and so they are all, again, humanity has all these internal divisions, and then the Covenant turns up, and then we all start to say, let's stop, fighting over like colonial rights and things and become one thing and focus on the problem. And so it's like we find new problems when there's not another problem. So it's like, that problem's gone, so what do I hate second most? And then third most and fourth most. There's always something.
And I think that's a survival instinct.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah. I mean, maybe we focus on the next problem or something.
Yeah, and I think it's possible for people to overcome instinct, but I think it's a very strong instinct is to find the next problem, and that's what keeps us alive.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I guess that's the truth, is that, like, by constantly focusing on whatever the biggest issue is, we continuously problem solve our problems and kill each other.
So what I'm thinking now is if aliens are the answer, we can sort of combine things with, the movie The Village.
Oh yeah.
So if we can, it's like everyone stays in the village because of the creature in the woods.
What? So you create?
We become the alien. We need to become the alien and unify us all.
Well, that's the plot of the Watchmen book. I think the movie.
I've never actually watched it properly, so like I don't know. But
again, spoiler warning for the next 5 seconds. I'll be very brief. But the Ozymandias, I think his name is, the head guy, basically creates this monster in an attempt to unite humanity.
Right, okay. Yeah. I need to rewatch that, actually, because I remember I wasn't paying attention.
They changed the ending in the movie, and they're both good endings, but they're very different. But I like both of them. I love
you can read the book at the same time as the movie, Daniel.
That is how I usually watch things. I read and watch, and don't pay attention to anything. That's a good example. I should go watch that again, because someone's mentioned that to me before. And then the only exception I can possibly think of, where there isn't, but it also, like, it's like, I get inconsistent things from this franchise, is Aliens. Because in Aliens, the whole thing is it's American corporations and the US Marine Corps, or the US colonial Marines specifically, are the ones going out and dealing with the problem. So, like, there's still this, like, it's still very national. But then at the same time, like, it seems like the way that they explain Earth and things, it's random, but the thing is, the way that they sort of discuss Earth, it sounds like it's more like a corporate hellscape kind of thing, like where like the countries are still just the countries, but the corporations have become the global power.
That seems extremely plausible.
Because like they talk about like a few specific ones, like Oh no, I can't remember the other names of the other ones. There's a whole bunch. There's MedLife or something, but like there's a whole bunch of organizations, and they seems like the corporations run Earth, and the governments are just kind of there, and they just do whatever they're told, kind of thing. And the corporations have like bases on other planets and things like that. It's free market gone insane.
Yeah.
So that seems to be the way that works in that one. So it's the only one that I found where it's still kind of national, but it's also we're in the space and all that kind of stuff. So, given all of those points that or the things we've just talked about, where do you guys see it leaning? Do you see it leaning more towards a dystopian understanding, a utopian understanding? Is there any stuff we haven't mentioned that affects the way that you guys see, the way we publicly see the unification topic?
No, I really think we've kind of hit the nail on the head with everything that we've come up with, is that it's an external threat that's needed.
Yeah. And something we need to see. We can talk about like global, climate change, but until we see it in our own backyard,
it's hard to get people to act.
Yeah. Until things start falling apart, until we...
So I guess that's kind of dystopic, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I suppose so. Like, we need to see it, something fundamentally breaking or getting horrible to galvanise us into doing something.
Yeah, like stopping the production of mobile phones, that'll radically change the way people see the world.
Yeah, no, I think...
We need to unite, we need to bring the phones back!
So, like, so after the thing that's going to galvanise us into doing something, how is the unified state perceived? Like, that. I guess that's the next question. Like, is being unified seen as a dystopian or utopian state after something has galvanized us?
I guess you could argue that one of the reasons we don't see it in fiction very often is because we think it will be utopic and story needs conflict.
Yeah.
So you're not going to write a story about a utopia unless something's going wrong within that utopia.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely.
So if you want to put a positive spin on it.
I mean, I'm trying to see it because it's like the example I made the last episode with America, that fundamentally they didn't like each other, but it was the problem with Britain that made them unify. And now, what American would sit there and say, yeah, I wish we went back to being civil states, like that each had about the that would, I mean, in these days terms, each one individually would have about the GDP of, I don't know, Libya or something. Like, the thing is, it's like, would they go back to that? Of course they wouldn't. Like some of them might say, yeah, let's break away and make a Christian theocracy or something. But the thing is, like, in general, the Americans are pretty happy with where they've ended up, in terms of, like, what it's come out of it. I guess that's what I'm trying to think of is, like, do we see past the crisis? Do we see that in these fictions, do we see the world as it becomes as something good? Like the unified us, is it a good thing kind of thing?
I think so. I think it's generally presented as a...
Yeah.
The end where everything's okay after that.
Yeah. Like, I'd agree that I reckon the way that it's shown, it's clear that people can dream of it. And they seem to dream of it in a context where it's positive. Like, we seem to all understand, and this is what I've talked to people about before, is that, like, people have said, yeah, obviously, if we could unify everyone, that would be fantastic. But have you seen all these problems kind of thing? It's like, so fundamentally, everyone does think it's a good place to get to. It's just that they have all these associations with it. And I think that's what comes up, is it's the associations, but how, like, but this would be this, and this would be this, and this would be this. It's like, I guess everyone thinks it's a positive, but there's so many caveats that people can't get past the caveats.
Yeah, the negatives outweigh the positives. Or the negative, like, I have to give up so much in order to achieve this.
And I guess that's the thing, isn't it? That I guess that some of this fiction, it sort of tries to show... Some of it, they often try to show in the details more than the general stories. Because the general stories are about people dying. But, like, the details of it, the day-to-day lives of the characters and things, it tries to show it as kind of like there are net gains that far outweigh the losses. But I think we see all the things that we'd have to sacrifice between here and there. And it's so dissuading because we don't understand enough about the realities of the changes and what we required. I think a lot of people see it and the gut reaction is, I'm going to get owned by China, or there's going to be a member of ISIS next door, or there's going to be, like, I'm going to be in a socialist system where I'm not allowed to keep anything that I own, or food lines, or whatever it is. And that stuff flies into the mind. And then, I guess a lot of the stuff I've seen is trying to dissuade that. And I guess we are too. So, yeah, I guess the final point would be, what do we reckon that tells us about ourselves? What does our fiction tell us about ourselves?
I guess maybe it is that the idea of being hugs and puppy dogs and rainbows is great, but we don't really believe that that's possible.
Yeah, maybe we're terrified of the process or the reality of it, and it's just nicer to think about it rather than to do it. Yeah, maybe one of the I guess it's a little bit of a digression, but just to touch on China. So the way China sees unification is because that back in, like, I think it was around 200 BC, the Qin dynasty united all of China, and all of civilized China, which was a smaller piece. Obviously, over the course of time, it's grown, But the thing is, that was kind of the beginning of this idea of unification for China.
Okay.
And this idea that it's better off, we do better when we're together. Because then it broke apart into like several dynasties, and then they all fought, and then one of them won again, and then they fight again, and then this is like, Chinese history is like 10 steps of break apart, come together, break apart, come together. Every time they break apart, something like 40 million people die in a big civil war, and then they come together again, and then they prosper and progress and invent a bunch of stuff, and then they break apart again. It's like this continuous thing of breaking apart and coming together. So there's this obsession with never breaking apart again, which is why the Chinese Communist Party is so intensely like, we have to keep it together, because in the like, that's why they're obsessed with finishing the war and taking Taiwan, is because it seems like the war's never ended kind of thing, and we need to finish it kind of thing. Like, I'm not defending the Chinese Communist Party because it's done so much bad stuff.
Are you sure, Daniel? It sounds to me like you are.
I'm just trying to make the point of the difference in the cultural perspective in China.
No.
No. It's a legitimate point, because I'm not. The thing is, the Chinese Communist Party, in its efforts to achieve the things it's trying to do, has killed a lot of people. And it's done a lot of very bad things. It's more, the way that they see it there is kind of like, you could almost imagine an America where the states keep breaking apart and fighting and coming together again, and like how they would see it, you'd probably end up with something similar.
And it does also raise a good point, is all the fictions that we've discussed are all American, maybe one or two British and one or two Australian, but it's all American, and it's all from the last 100 years. So I guess it might be just worth acknowledging that fact that we're coming from a pretty limited cultural background in terms of these fictions. So maybe it would be different if we had some ancient Chinese sci-fi.
There's like an author named Li Suqian or something he's got a bunch of awards. He's Chinese, and I'd be interested to read it now and see.
Three-body problem?
I think so.
Yeah,
yes.
Good. But they are. I could tell that I was reading an author from a different culture. It was very interesting. I'd highly recommend you read it.
Yeah, because the Chinese culture has this big obsession with the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which is I can't remember the names of the Three Kingdoms, but like, it's like this warring period where it's kind of meant to be shown as like a tragedy. Like, it's this glorious tragedy, like all these good people who just want like the right things fighting and killing each other, and it's meant to be this sad thing that they're forced to kill each other because they're from different kingdoms. And then it's ultimately Cao Cao, or Cao Cao, and Wu, I think is the name of his kingdom, takes over all of it. Or Wei or something, I can't remember. But he takes over the entirety of China in the end. And it's basically meant to be, and it's the start of the Jin dynasty, so now it's a good part again, kind of thing. Like, the way they see it is very different. And yeah, I'd be interested for like the Middle East or Africa or something, or Latin America, to know how they see the context. Because it's all formed by our histories. And that's the thing with Europe. We have this long-standing thing with the Catholic Church that I think has affected a lot of it. Because like, the Catholic Church and the communist powers, essentially, we have this concept around authority, like it's caused us so many problems. Because Protestantism was a rejection of Catholicism, and obviously the whole democratic liberal movements of the 20th century were trying to like divorce themselves from the totalitarianism that communism went towards. So we've got this strong sense of like, authority causes bad things, and I think it's thrown us in the opposite direction, where like we've gone too far, and now we're dedicated to anything that gets rid of all authority, and it's kind of destroying the system we live in fundamentally. Anyway, so look, I think we've covered it pretty well. I think it seems like the key thing we've come away from is we need some aliens to attack us to really solve the problem.
And Daniel wants us to speak Chinese.
I'm giving away my secrets. No, it's just that we seem to need that. We're fundamentally flawed as a species, apparently.
And then I would argue that that's not true unification then, if there are other sentient beings that we're not unified with.
Yeah. We always apparently need to hate someone. I guess at some point maybe we'll evolve, and then we'll get to the point where we get past it. But I guess the thing, it's the challenge for us as human beings, as we close this out, the challenge for us as human beings is to see the merit of things without requiring an external threat. Like, manually forcing our lens to be larger, not thinking about Earth, think about the solar system, think about the galaxy, think about everything around us and how small we are next to it, and not force ourselves to need an enemy, but just do it on our own. For the same reason the Americans would embrace being American rather than being from their states, they are greater than the sum of their parts because they've come together. And so hopefully that's where we can go next. Hopefully we can chase that.
For the greater good.
For the greater good, exactly. So, goodbye. Thanks for listening.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.